All right, it is 4 o'clock. It is probably about time to get rolling. If Sam and Joel, you're ready to take the show on the road?
Sure.
Excellent. All right, well, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this option 2 installment of information literacy in the age of AI. I am joined by the experts themselves today, and I'm very, very thrilled that we're going to be able to share the next hour with you. This morning had some really engaging conversation towards the end for Q&A. I'm very excited to see how that goes this time as well. So my name is Emma Gray. I'm a product manager here on the Microsoft Education team. I work on Search Progress and Search Coach, which are two of our flagship tools for information literacy here at Microsoft. And I am joined by members here from the Digital Inquiry Group. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Thanks so much, Emma. I'm Joel Breakstone. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital Inquiry Group. We are a new nonprofit that focuses on supporting young people to be better consumers of online information. Previous to January, we were a group based at Stanford. We were the Stanford History Education Group, and we spun out in January to become an independent nonprofit. Over the course of 2 decades at Stanford, we tested and developed new materials that focused on helping students to be more discerning when looking at information online. I had been at the Stanford History Education Group for 15 years before co-founding the Digital Inquiry Group with Sam. And before that, I was a high school history teacher. Now I'll turn it over to Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Wineburg. As Joel said, I helped to create the Digital Inquiry Group after 23 years of being a professor at Stanford. Just a word about our collaboration with Microsoft. It actually goes back to the earliest days in the development of Search Coach. I served as a consultant to the team that designed the tool. Microsoft's education team had come across our Stanford research, where we documented some of the issues that students have when they kind of evaluate websites and rely on superficial features, how a site looks, or a host of other easily manipulated features. The Microsoft team had seen our research also on professional fact checkers, who learn about an unfamiliar site not by dwelling on it or clicking on every link, but actually by leaving it and opening up new tabs, a process that we call lateral reading. We'll talk about that. And many of the features actually that we describe in our research have been built into the products that you'll hear about today. So welcome.
Excellent. We are so very glad to have the two of you with us. I'm going to take control back of those slides. So the agenda for today, we're going to open up with a bit of a keynote from Dr. Breakstone and Dr. Wineburg. Live Q&A is going to take up a full half hour at the end. And this was such a highlight this morning to hear the questions that people had, to open up that discussion. So please do, as questions come up, use that Q&A tab. I'll show you how to do that in a second, or at least where the button is. And then we'll share plenty of resources in the next steps so that you can take this and bring it to whatever it is you plan to do next. So from a housekeeping standpoint, I do want to flag this is just the start of a conversation. There's so much to cover here. I think Sam will even say it. One webinar is not nearly enough time, but we plan to give you as many resources as possible so that moving forward, you feel comfortable and confident bringing this content to your learners, bringing it to your colleagues, and making this more of a conversation in the future. That Q&A button looks like it does on the slide here with the outline. And you can use it across the top tab whenever you would like. It can happen during the presentation as the questions come up for you. And you can also upvote or expand upon the questions from your other audience members. And so I will be taking those questions, and based on the level of engagement and the relevance to the conversation, bring them forward to our wonderful panelists at the end. And without further ado, I will pass it along to Sam Wineburg.
Thank you, Emma. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past year, you know about the kind of advances that AI has made and how this technology is actually, becoming an integral part of every corner of our lives. Its powers are, to say the least, impressive. I mean, it's a tool that within seconds can rewrite a Taylor Swift song in the form of a Shakespearean sonnet, or come up with different explanations of linear equations depending upon the level of the learner, or reassure, as we have in the slide here, a toddler who's scared that there's a Tyrannosaurus in the closet by creating a tailor-made bedtime story. Or in a school context, evaluate a student essay, not only pinpointing the stylistic problems and the ambiguities or non sequiturs, but anticipating counter arguments and identifying ways to refute them. It's impossible not to be impressed with these advances. The AI tools that have made headlines are often referred to as large language models, LLMs. They're created by feeding billions of words taken from the internet and entering them into an algorithmic model. Now, the model then takes all these data and identifies linguistic and syntactic patterns. You might an easy way to think about what's going on is think about what your smartphone does when you type a word and it predicts the next word, and try to multiply that power by an exponential number. Ask the model any kind of question. For instance, why was Pluto decommissioned as a planet? Or if Archduke Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated, would there have been a World War I? Or is a bicameral legislature better than a unicameral one? And an answer is served up. And if the answer is too detailed or overly abstract, ask the model, ask the LLM to dial it down, and it happily obliges. Feeling clueless about the controversy around fracking and want to learn more, but not so much that it requires you to prepare for your oral exam? The model meets you where you are at. Now, the advances of large language models have prompted some to suggest that artificial intelligence will, quote, take the legwork out of searching, rendering knowledge about how the internet works, for instance, understanding domains, knowing how to search effectively, knowing how to choose keywords, knowing how to use Boolean operators, knowing how to determine which results are credible and which are sham. It will make all of that obsolete. Think about it. I mean, why waste energy crafting precise keywords or rifling through lists of results when you can just enter a question into a chatbot and voila, you get a response that is uncannily human in tone? Perhaps the pundits are right. Traditional search skills maybe are a thing of the past. What we're going to try to convince you of today in this webinar is that not only is this conclusion false, it is very, very dangerous. The advent of AI has actually made search skills more essential, not less. There's an important reason that the word artificial precedes the word intelligence. Despite their ability to simulate thinking, large language models do not think. No matter how crafty they are in mimicking the cadence and rhythm of ordinary speech, these models are pattern finders that operate on mathematical principles and statistical probabilities. They rely on the words they've been trained on, and the responses they produce are the equivalent of an informational green smoothie, combining bits and pieces of text from an endless array of genres: Wikipedia articles, blogs, social media posts, newspaper articles, practically anything that's available on the internet. What's often not included in the training data? Sources behind paywalls, which deprive these models of an enormous amount of high quality, vetted information. What does all of this mean for us, for educators? First, it means that large language models are not programmed to tell your students what's true. And your students need to understand that. Answers are not necessarily accurate or precise. They haven't been vetted or peer reviewed. Yet the ability of these models to imitate human language makes the responses come across as highly persuasive, even authoritative. And there's problems that come out of this. When billions of words are put into a linguistic blender, pureed and reconstituted, some answers can come out the other end that are illogical, incomprehensible, or downright absurd. For instance, you might have heard about the LLM response that glue should be used to prevent cheese from sliding off a pizza, or that eating rocks in moderation provides important nutrients. Now, absurdities like these are easy to spot. But what about questions that ask the model about a medical condition, and it produces references to scientific articles that don't even exist? Fabrications like these, that are also referred to as hallucinations, can seriously impair our ability to locate quality information when we need it most. It's way too early in the development of AI to rely on its responses for important medical, financial, or legal advice. However, if we think of AI responses as starting points in the research process, they can be incredible time savers. Want to get quickly smart about how dinosaurs became extinct, or a quick kind of overview of why Galileo was excommunicated, or even how photosynthesis works? Large language models provide an instant starting point. Where does the problem come in? It comes in when that starting point becomes an endpoint, the final word in an inquiry rather than a useful point of departure. Some of you might have heard about the Battle of Lexington. I would hope that the people from Massachusetts certainly have heard about it. The shot heard round the world in Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem. It was the opening shot in the American Revolution, a confrontation between British soldiers and Minutemen on Lexington Green on April 19, 1775. Now, we will never know for sure who fired the first shot, but when we asked an LLM, a model, about it, it had its own ideas. So I'm going to read to you an exchange, a snippet from an exchange. First, we asked, who fired the first shot at Lexington? And the response of the model, it is believed to have been fired by an unknown British soldier. So we should give some credit to where credit's due. The model says it is believed. It's a qualification that indicates doubt. But from here, things go downhill, and they go downhill fast. So when asked about casualties on either side, the model tells us that 2 or 3 British soldiers were killed. It's well documented by historians that 8 Minutemen lost their lives, but the British emerged unscathed, except for an injury to a soldier's foot, which was thought to be caused by friendly fire from their own side. Now, when the model was pressed to reveal how it knows about British casualties, the model retreated. And I quote, the specific number of British soldiers killed on Lexington Green during the initial confrontation is subject to historical debate, and exact figures may vary depending on sources. So there's another kind of qualification. But what happens when we directly challenge the model and we ask a follow-up question? Are there bona fide sources? I'm quoting, this is the question we asked, that claim that there were British fatalities at Lexington. Are you sure? At this point, the model does a 180. You are correct. I apologize for the confusion. There is indeed a consensus among historians that there were no British fatalities during the initial confrontation on Lexington Green. So how did the model go from a tone of being all-knowing to this kind of apologetic, all-apologizing tone? What was the secret sauce or the ingredient that made it, quote, rethink? Because it didn't really rethink, it's responding to the prompt. The secret sauce is the very thing that your students don't have a lot of, that your students lack, and which makes them most likely to take an AI response at face value without question. And that secret ingredient is something that we had and most of your students will not, and it is background knowledge. Now, the pioneers of artificial intelligence, scholars like MIT's computer scientist Harold Abelson, recognize that large language models are susceptible to hallucinations. And he wrote that he said that if students come across something that, quote, sounds fishy, they should say, quote, well, maybe it's not true. But think about it. Here's the problem. To know if something sounds fishy, you need to have smelled fish before. You need to know something about the topic. We were able to challenge the model because we brought background knowledge about the Battle of Lexington. If we didn't, there's nothing in the model's response, not a thing that sounded fishy. On the contrary, the responses sounded pretty darn convincing. There's a second problem with Abelson's advice. Even if something does sound fishy, there's the underlying assumption that students know how to verify a response. But if it's anything that we've learned in the whole context of digital literacy, information literacy, from research across multiple countries, the US, Canada, Sweden, the UK, Italy, it's that students' search skills are, well, to be generous, in need of an upgrade. And dozens of studies attest to this. To cite just one of these studies, it's the largest study of its kind, and was completed by our own research group and published in a leading education journal, Educational Researcher. We had 3,448 high school students, and we asked them to assess a site claiming to offer objective advice on climate change. Now, the group actually was backed by fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil. And despite students having an open internet connection and being told to do anything they normally would to verify a source, 96% of the students, the overwhelming vast majority, never learned about the organization's ties to the fossil fuel industry.
So this is where Search Coach and Search Progress come in. These tools scaffold the search process for students. Search Coach is a browser with guardrails, a safe place for students to learn the skills of digital literacy. Students don't have to strain to remember Boolean operators. The most common are built right into the browser. And that means that students can focus their attention on what's most important, which is evaluating sources. Search Coach's browser allows students to designate the domain they want to search, the file type they want to obtain, even the country in which to locate their search. And the most trafficked news results are accompanied by a NewsGuard rating that gives the source a credibility score so that students can easily distinguish a venue known for spewing misinformation from one with a track record for providing accurate content. And for teachers, Search Coach and Search Progress create new and exciting possibilities for tracking student search skills in ways that would be impossible if a teacher had to walk around the room scanning 30 different student monitors. With the press of a button, teachers can see how students are thinking about keywords by displaying a word cloud that shows their most common search terms. Teachers can then see whether a student clicks on the first search result or do they scan the full set of search results before pausing to make a wiser decision about where to begin their search. And there's the option to create your own intranet. You can pick out a designated set of sources for students to review. It's a crucial instructional scaffold that supports students before releasing them into an ocean of sources on the unvetted internet. So picking a set of sources that provide students with opportunities to practice engaging with different types of sources, and then having a clear idea of the issues that they'll encounter so that you don't have to be making sense of random sources that students happen to encounter. Instead, you can have gone through them before and have some clear ideas about the strengths and weaknesses of those sources to hopefully have a more productive conversation to build student skills along the way. But perhaps the most important feature of all is one that requires students to justify why they chose a particular site. So either after they look at that curated set of sources or they've been searching online, there's the opportunity for students to write a few sentences indicating on what basis they made their decision about the credibility of a given source. And this feature provides teachers with crucial data about the thinking that lies behind students' responses. It's the equivalent of having students show their work in a math class. And this insight into students' thinking, particularly their misconceptions, facilitates formative assessment. So if I have asked my students to go and evaluate a series of sources, a quick scan of their explanations of why they have chosen different sources can really inform my next steps instructionally. If my students continue to struggle to think about who's behind that website about climate change that Sam referenced before, I can spend a little bit more time really helping students to understand why it is so critical to ask the question of who's behind the information that I'm consuming online. And as a result, we can really more closely tailor our instruction to the needs of our particular students. So what we have been working to do is to develop materials that maximize the opportunities offered by Search Coach and Search Progress in order to create lessons that weave digital literacy into disciplinary content. We've drafted a series of lessons that integrate Search Coach and Search Progress into core school subjects, specifically social studies and science. And rather than being an add-on, these lessons weave the skills of digital literacy into things we already teach: how to verify a scientific claim, how to evaluate the credentials of someone who claims to be an expert, or how to find out if a politician's statement has been tampered with or ripped out of context. And so we have put together a 3-lesson sequence. There is one introductory lesson to be used in either science or social studies classrooms, and it is focused on that skill that Sam mentioned at the beginning of the session: lateral reading, the move that our research showed fact checkers relied upon in order to make better decisions about what to trust on the internet. And by opening up new tabs in their browser, they could better understand what exactly they were looking at. And so the first lesson introduces students to that skill, and in particular by having the instructor do some modeling to show their screen as they encounter an unfamiliar source, and then to articulate your thinking as you go through an evaluation of that source. And the 2 follow-up lessons have 2 versions: one for science classrooms and one for social studies classrooms. The second lesson is focused on verifying claims on social media, the platforms where we know our students are spending so much of their time: TikTok and Instagram. And the science lesson focuses on concussions in young athletes, and the social studies lesson on claims connected to the claim that there are funerals being held in Disney World. And then the third lesson is focused on what kinds of sources can you use once you have read laterally. So it's one thing to open a new tab and do a search about an unfamiliar source, but it's quite another to make sense of the information that you find when you do that search. And so this lesson in particular supports students in thinking about how Wikipedia can be a really helpful source for getting smart quick about unfamiliar topics. We are not claiming that Wikipedia is where your research should end, but it can be a really excellent jumping off place, particularly on well-known and prominent topics. And so the science lesson focuses on having students engage with some viral health trends and how Wikipedia entries can be useful in making sense of them. And then the social studies lesson focuses on climate change and Wikipedia entries on that topic. So just to provide a little bit more context of what this can look like in practice, that science lesson about viral health trends is about a series of sources related to a procedure known as mewing, which are tongue exercises that will supposedly result in a more defined jawline. It is featured in thousands of videos on social media with millions of views. And it has celebrity endorsements, including from figures like supermodel Bella Hadid. And so in the lesson, students have to evaluate different sources to understand what kinds of sources they should trust, and really to come to the conclusion that there are no scientific studies that attest to mewing's effectiveness. And in the process, students will really begin to have a better grasp of the difference between anecdotal accounts and scientific claims that are backed by solid evidence. So there are things like health magazines and YouTube videos and TikToks. One of the YouTube videos is from the son of the dentist who claims to have invented mewing. And so students then do searches to read laterally about these different sources. And then afterwards, after students have evaluated these sources, there's an opportunity as an instructor to bring up that word cloud that we referenced before to see the different search terms that students have used. Because one of the things that we found over and over again over the last number of years as we've done work with schools and teachers and students all across the country is it's one thing to begin to do some lateral reading, but it's quite another to be skilled at it. You can open up a new tab, but understanding how to accurately evaluate different sources takes time to become skilled at. And so it's really important to provide opportunities to debrief the process. And so those word clouds can give us a sense of the types of search terms that students are using and understanding which searches yield better information about these various sources, the TikTok videos and the YouTube, and a Wikipedia entry, which in this case is incredibly well sourced, that has links to very credible sources and can help you really understand what is mewing and to understand the lack of any scientific evidence, which hopefully will prevent you from spending a great deal of time doing these jaw exercises, or spending a lot of money on the rock hard gum that was profiled in that New York Times article that Sam referenced in the chat, which most dentists tell you are terrible ideas to put those in your mouth. So in the process, students are going to have an opportunity to learn much more both about the process and these particular sources.
So to kind of conclude our part of this session before we get to the Q&A, it goes without saying. I mean, anybody that's spent time with today's students know that they are constantly on their phones. They're leading digital lives, and the challenge for school to stay relevant is to equip our today's young people with the skills to access and evaluate the information that shows up on their phones. The skills of digital literacy, information literacy, however you want to call it, they can't be just an add-on or a barnacle, an extracurricular activity, or we can't kind of dispense with it in a one-off workshop. If students are to become informed digital citizens, they need to learn how to navigate a very uneven digital environment, and they need to learn how to do this in their science class, in their history class, in their civics class, essentially across the entire curriculum. Back in the olden days, the analog age, the key question was where to find information. That's no longer the case. We suffer from an avalanche of information that threatens to suffocate us. The key question now is, how do we learn to efficiently evaluate this information? Our students are growing up in a world where vetting information, which was once somebody else's job, it was once the duty of a professional journalists or subject matter experts or editors or librarians, that commitment, that requirement, that duty falls on the shoulders of each and every one of us. The philosopher at the University of Connecticut, Michael Lynch, noted that the internet is like a scalpel. It can be used for ill or it can be used for good. He wrote, it is the world's best fact checker and the world's best bias confirmer, often at the same time. There's really no going back. No matter how many internet filters your school might impose, the digital genie cannot be stuffed back into the bottle. Telling ourselves that it's somebody else's job to prepare students for the world they encounter on their phones may temporarily quiet our conscience. But when misinformation runs amok, it's impossible to avoid the obvious. If we don't prepare students to be thoughtful citizens in this challenging, seemingly infinite digital world, who will?
To summarize, we want to just have a few takeaways. One is that without the skills of search, students are at the behest of whatever AI produces, whether it's accurate or not. AI complements search, but it's not its replacement. To be effective, digital literacy has to be part of how we teach core school subjects. And new tools make this integration easier than ever before. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We are really looking forward to discussing your questions in just a moment. But first, Emma's going to share some additional resources for all of us.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, folks who have engaged so heavily in the chat so far. Yes, I know that folks live busy lives, and so the first thing we're going to do is drop this slide here really quickly. So if you need to leave, take a picture of this or scan the QR code, I will send you all of these resources and more, including a link to this deck for after this session. So please, if you're interested, and if you can't stay for the whole Q&A, find that QR code, send that information there, or if that doesn't work for you, just reach out to me. I can drop my email into the chat. Now, from a Q&A standpoint, I will be moderating things. I've kept the QR code for the resources here. I didn't do that this morning, and this is a nice way to keep that going. And I'm going to jump over to Q&A because it looks like there's something new in the tab. All right, question from Andrew Pemberton. What are your recommendations for modeling ethical AI usage in social science courses, particularly when students are being tasked with research projects?
Well, the first thing that we have to recognize that, I mean, in many places there are age requirements for using large language models, and so we have to be aware of that. I think that one of the things that Search Coach offers and is the ability to create an intranet, and so in terms of the ethical use, first of all, I would prepare students to be ethical in a traditional search, to have some basic search skills before they are let loose on either a large language model or a small language model. That you work with adult learners at university as an instructional designer. I think I would abide by that same advice, that the place to start is to recognize that the foundation for the ethical or the responsible use of a large language model of generative AI is to make sure that some general search skills are already in place, because otherwise students are at the behest of whatever a model provides. And so without the ability to make basic distinctions in the quality of a response, then students are really left naked in the face of whatever an LLM presents to them. So that really is, I would say, the ground truth of what we're trying to convey here, that search is the foundation on which AI use should be predicated.
Andrew, something I would add that I've heard from a couple of different places now is the role of transparency in all of this. So just in the same way that search progress might allow you to track your research process over time and to share your reflections as you go, I've heard similar things from educators saying that as their learners are using AI, being transparent about it and making it very clear that, if it's not banned, this is an open conversation. And I should add a disclaimer here. We don't believe that AI should be banned in classrooms because it can't be banned at home. Maybe that's more for the older folks or the folks who teach younger learners in the call. So I think that, yeah, transparency, responsibility, the ability to cite primary and secondary sources instead of the not even catenary source that a large language model might be.
There's one other thought that I would add, Emma, if we're talking about an ethical use and the kinds of understanding students need to have before they use these tools responsibly. The internet is not a neutral source. It is a source that is heavily weighted in terms of elite responses or educated responses. They are often reflective of certain racial characteristics that are predominant, largely white, certainly in English. Often they reflect the vast majority of the kinds of people that put these models together and create the training sets, and they are often tech workers, and they are not equally represented across genders and across races and across socioeconomic classes. And consequently, the internet reflects the kind of biases that we contend with in all forms of social life. And students need to understand that. One of the ways, there's an excellent study that came out of Purdue. How do you convey that to people who are not experts in the use of large language models, who really don't know a whole lot about how they work? And these Purdue researchers had novices, had lay people read a scenario about the way that large language models engage in facial recognition. And as you might imagine, these models do much better with white faces than they do with faces of people of color. And so that understanding alone made users a bit more cautious when they looked at responses for large language models for data on which the models were not trained. And so in that sense, coming up with powerful examples that are intuitive, that help people understand that these products reflect our human biases and are not free of them, is also, I think, a really important ethical understanding to have.
It goes back to that theme as well of AI as a starting point instead of an end point. In terms of the importance of bringing some critical thinking skills to that very first output that comes along after a prompt. Joel, did you have something? I noticed you come off mute.
I was just going to say that sort of process, right, that you were just describing of the, it's one thing to have students use AI for, to ask a question, but then to track down what are those actual sources, right, in terms of the kinds of verification, so that you can have some kind of confidence in the information that it's providing, right, of, just think back to the example that Sam had about the Battle of Lexington, right, of the, we don't want to simply accept at face value the information that's being provided. And so certainly if we want it to be a jumping off place, we need to provide some clear examples of what it looks like to confirm the quality of the information that we're pulling from a model.
I'm seeing another question here. What do you recommend if we want students to also do a check on the bias of a source so that they might understand that information may be selectively left out of what's written on a website? This is a softball pitch to one of you two.
Joel, you want to take it?
Well, I think that's at the heart of what we're trying to get students to do when we are having them read laterally. By getting off of a page, you can understand what is the perspective of the person or organization that is creating the content, and by having that sense of where they're coming from and what they're attempting to do with the content that they are creating, we can understand that content so much better. And so rather than giving our attention to a source without understanding who they are or even what they are, we are doing ourselves a disservice. We're wasting our time and energy. We live in an age of information overabundance, and before we give our attention to a source, we should first determine whether or not it's worthy of our attention. And so of taking that moment to quickly get a sense of what is this thing? Is it what I think it is? What is their motivation here? Is can save us a great deal of time and trouble in terms of the ways in which often people, particularly bad actors, are trying to influence us online.
One of the things that we've revealed in research that we've done, where we also teach people to enunciate their thoughts as they're looking at websites, and we kind of track the processes they go from forming an initial impression to coming to a conclusion. And one of the things that differentiates between novice users and across all age levels and really skilled users of the internet is that when they come to a site that they're not familiar with, novice users or unskilled users will often ask themselves, is this a credible site? And they will spend a lot of time pressing on links, or if it's a site, for instance, on climate change, they will look at graphs and they will look at data. And typically they don't have the background knowledge to, for instance, look at the raw data of a scientific study. And instead, what skilled people do before they make a deep investment of attention in an unfamiliar site is they don't ask, is this a credible source? They ask, is this organization what I think it is? And so, for instance, we use in our trainings a site from the International Life Sciences Institute, ilsi.org. And when you go to that site, it's a terrific site to use with your students because it is extremely well laid out. It's aesthetically beautiful. It has there's a scientific advisory board. They are a .org, which often trips up a lot of students. They are a 501c3, which in the United States is a non-for-profit organization. It has all of the bells and whistles of credibility. And what we will see is when students are told, do anything you normally would do, and adults are told what you do, they will spend 5 minutes on the site and basically kind of say, well, it looks kind of okay. And what skilled people do is they use their time in a different way. They recognize that the most precious thing that they have is their attention, and they don't want to waste their attention. And so what they do is they use the rest of the internet by opening up tabs and engaging in lateral reading as a form of reputational calibration. They put the name of this organization into their browser and very quickly learn from a variety of credible sources, major news sources, over and over, that there's something not quite right going on, that this particular group is actually funded by the food and the chemical and the agribusiness industries. And so that is a conclusion. When there is a plethora of good sources on the internet, why waste our attention on sources that are, in this particular instance, engaged in a big kind of conflict of interest? So that's another way to think about what the internet is, as a form of reputational calibration.
I'll rapid fire some of the questions in the chat. At what age do you recommend beginning the Search Coach program, and how does it scaffold the concept of safe searching for students at that younger stage? My very quick answer to that is we designed it for middle schoolers originally, but it has been used as early as kindergarten, if you'll believe it, and as late as first or second year university for an intro to research course. That surprised us. We were delighted to hear it. There are some modifications that we could probably make in the future if there's a lot of interest to get this in the hands of kindergartners. But the reason why I might choose Search Coach over a different search engine with training wheels out there is that Search Coach isn't exclusively an intranet of sources. I say intranet because many of the other sources, or many of the other solutions require you to put in only the websites that learners can access. Search Coach uses Bing Safe Search by default on strict, and you can't change it. And so it provides that walled garden in a way. You can see what your learners have been searching up, but it doesn't totally hide the less reputable sites, because if they don't include adult content, they're still going to be there. And that gives you a chance to practice in, yes, a safer space, but a more realistic representation of the internet from that place. I use Bing Safe Search Strict just as a human, as an adult. And so that's something else that I would say there too. And then the other question has to do with, if your school's a Microsoft school, yeah, this is available in Teams for Education, and I've got a link that I can share with you at the end. I've seen some discussions of NewsGuard. I love that folks are just starting to get to know each other in the chat. This is great. Are there other burning questions? We have a couple of fun bonus topics that we can lean into here a little bit if folks don't have anything further that's pressing.
Emma, I'll just underscore the comment from Lisa Hale. Making your own website list, particularly when you're talking about younger learners, to begin by having students go to a smaller series of sites that we as educators select in order to give them practice in making these basic distinctions before sending them into the ocean of sources and letting them go onto their own devices, is a really, really useful way to begin the process. Particularly, I mean, if you think about it, we're all driving along the information superhighway, and none of us has gotten, none of us has taken a driving test, and we didn't get a driver's education manual. We just started using it. And, this is a way of trying to realize that these technologies that have imbued themselves in all aspects of our life have done so without kind of any of us receiving formal instruction on how to use them. So by creating a kind of small walled garden, by using the intranet feature, and selecting the kind of sources that vary in quality, you can start to see, wait a second, are my students making these basic distinctions between a series of 4 or 5 sources that all claim to be quality sources, but which as an educator are not. So that's really a way of thinking about what age should you start with? Well, I would not allow students to kind of progress way, way beyond that until they've first shown that they can make some of these basic distinctions.
I think that's really well put. And I think on the subject of information superhighway, something that's come up in some of our conversations, and I think some of the conversations that I know that some of the people in the chat have had in the past, is the role that information literacy can play with a student's well-being. So there was some early research that I came across that suggested that better information or media literacy skills can potentially serve as a bit of a buffer between the onslaught of information coming at you in a day and yourself. And this goes back to the concept that Joel mentioned before, which is critical ignoring. But just not taking everything you see at face value can be a really powerful way to preserve your mental well-being as you're navigating the internet.
Absolutely. I think that one of the key parts of all of this is to equip students with the tools to deal with this onslaught. It is overwhelming how much information you encounter online, and we're not trying to tell students that they should spend an enormous amount of time trying to make sense of every single source that comes across their screen. Far from it. Instead, we want students to be able to efficiently decide what is worth their time and attention. That's really a different kind of orientation to information, right? It's about knowing when to dig in and decide if you're making a decision that is important for you or the communities in which you live. Maybe you do take a little bit of time and quickly get a sense of whether or not a source is credible. But in other instances, part of what we want students to be able to do is to, in a click or two, say like, no, I want no part of that. I'm moving on to something else. And that is empowering, right? To understand how to engage with all of this information. And related to that, we think it's really important to make sure that we're providing students with quality sources also, because we want to help students to understand how the internet is this incredible resource to become well-informed and to be able to make better decisions that reflect your own interests and needs. And we don't want students walking away thinking, the internet is just full of lies. Instead, we want students to encounter really strong sources to say like, oh yeah, this is a good place for me to learn about mewing, for instance, right? And why some of those linked references in the Wikipedia page are excellent sources, and how they help you to understand that mewing has no basis in science. And so that's the kind of process that we really want students to have opportunities to experience, so that they see how they can use the internet well, not to think that that the internet is devoid of any value.
Emma, when I think of the question of well-being, I think the opposite of well-being, particularly when we're thinking about creating informed citizens, is someone who's so confused that they throw their hands up and they say, you just can't believe anything these days. And that is a really scary position to be in. And, it's interesting that when we think about the origins of disinformation campaigns, even before the internet, and look at the history of disinformation, for instance, the Russian disinformatia. People think that the goal was to convince people of a particular position against another position. But actually, when you look at the writings of Lenin on the use of kind of manipulating public opinion, the goal of Russian disinformation is not to persuade people of a particular view, but to create, and this is a translation from the Russian, to create muddled thinking. And so by actually teaching people that how to distinguish between solid sources and sources that are sham, we're doing the opposite of creating muddled thinkers. We're creating people who have self-efficacy, who feel efficacious in being able to make the kinds of distinctions that allow them to make and form opinions about issues that are issues in civic life, that are issues that comprise the whole compendium of informed citizenship. And so one of the things that we hope that is a kind of result is not only choosing better sources, but individuals, our students, trusting themselves more to make better decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm seeing some good gifts in the chat. Another interesting angle for this comes almost from a vocabulary perspective. And it's something that a team at Microsoft Research published something about a little while ago now, is the concept of over-reliance. And for those of you who are interested, and I have been encouraged, I think we really do need to create a shorter resource on this because it's an important concept, is the inverse of under-reliance on a tool. So if we want to prepare learners for the workplaces and the information ecosystem of the future, helping them develop appropriate reliance on these tools is really critical. So under-reliance isn't an option, but over-reliance is a problem too. And so finding ways to develop that healthy critical balance is really important. There's a cool QR code that I'll be including that you could scan there if you're interested in learning more.
I'll put a plug in for this review as well. This is the source where I learned about the Purdue study. I then went and read the original study and have started a correspondence with the researchers. So it's really a gold mine of references on kind of the state of the art. And it's also very short.
And really well written. I'm a big fan of this team. I'm always very happy when we get a chance to say hi to them. How's everyone doing? We've been sitting for a little while. Actually, you've all had your cameras off, so you could have been pacing the room for all I know, or maybe some of you are lucky enough to be out on a walk. Something we could do, I know we have some very engaged people in the chat here. We could open it up a little bit further. There are some folks in the call who have their own experiences with Search Progress and Search Coach. And I'm not going to volunteer Kylie or Alicia at all in this context. But if either of you are interested in chatting a little bit or sharing a bit about your experiences with Search Progress or Search Coach, just for the sake of the other educators on the call, you are welcome to. But it's also the end of the day on a Monday or early-ish on a Tuesday if you're Kylie. So I will not put that pressure on either of you. But if you'd like to put your hand up, and I'll give you camera access. And in the meantime, okay, Kylie, or anyone else who I don't know personally, but maybe who has some things to share. Okay, Kylie, you should be able to come off mute and turn your camera on if you're interested. Good to see you.
Good morning or evening. I'll have to be very quiet. I'm in an office at the moment, but first of all, thank you so much for this morning. It's been an amazing learning, and I've been tweeting away with all of my learnings from this morning. But for me, I work purely online. My class is purely online. So teaching my students how to use Search Coach to improve the types of information that they're getting has been absolutely a game changer. For me, looking at the class data at the beginning of our calls when we've done a search, looking at the word clouds, looking at, the evaluations the students are writing. And I'm dealing with students who are 16, 17, 18 years of age. And the conversations they're now having about, oh, why is this word so large in our word cloud? Has that got something to do with our searches when we're looking at what we're looking at, it doesn't actually make sense. So they're becoming a lot more critical about what they're looking at, about how they're searching, and really thinking about where their information is coming from, which is great for me as a teacher because I get less sources about the American experience in Cambodia when I've asked the students to search about the Australian experience in the Cambodian conflict. So, that was a big game changer one for me. But seeing the kids use this tool, it took a little while for them to default to this rather than just opening a browser. That was probably the biggest hurdle. But now that they're doing this on a regular basis and really looking at the sources that they are accessing, it has helped them across the board in their skills, but just in their general life too. So I can't praise Search Coach enough. My experiences with it have been fantastic.
Well, it takes educators like you, Kylie, and some of the other folks on the call to to make this possible, right? I think it was in total about 800 educators in our original Search Coach community that spun this up out of nothing. And it's folks like you who use it in the classroom who make this a real thing that gets better with feedback over time. So yeah, thank you. And do you have an applause react? Thanks, Kylie, for being bold enough to come off camera and off mute with us today. I'm happy to open the mic if anyone else has anything to say, but we have 5 minutes left as well. And so I figured I would just once again touch on some of these resources. The one that I am personally very excited about isn't updated yet, but will be next week. So consider this your sneak peek. The Minecraft AI link in the bottom right corner here, as of the end of next week, we'll have a video series on AI literacy where they teach chicken, like the little Minecraft chicken, in the same way or in a symbolic representation of how they teach a large language model. And I've seen the sneak preview, I've showed it to my parents, and it makes a lot more sense to them now. And so that's been quite delightful. I'm really, really looking forward to that. As well, we've got the AI Classroom Toolkit. If you're just getting started having these conversations with your class, we have the Investigators Minecraft Worlds that Sam and Joel actually had an opportunity to partner with the Minecraft team on. I don't know if either of you wanted to share something about that.
Yeah, happy to talk a little bit about that, in addition to working with the Minecraft team to integrate these types of ways of investigating sources into the game itself. We developed a series of supplementary resources that you can use to in tandem with the game itself. And so we created a series of lesson plans that have additional examples and activities for students to investigate online sources and to practice reading laterally in connection with the game. So if you are either interested in trying out the game or in seeing some of those additional lesson plans that we built out, you can follow the link that Emma has shared there.
The other things I'll flag, of course, the beautiful new website, inquirygroup.org, that belongs to Sam and Joel and their wonderful team. The teachai.org website. This is for folks, especially if you're looking to have that first conversation with your district about what it means to enable AI for folks who are discouraged from using it. That's a really, really wonderful place. It's another one of those by educators for educators websites. And I'm a huge fan of the team at teachai. Some of them worked on code.org as well. If you want to learn more about Search Progress and Search Coach, that Search Coach MEC link down in the bottom left is where you can find the free online course. I already mentioned the Minecraft link. And if this feels like a lot, actually, it's a PowerPoint Live as well. So you can click to access the free lesson plans if you want to see the lessons that Sam and Joel put together directly. The easiest thing might be to fill out this form. It's just me on the other side. It's not some big distribution list. And I will share you a digest of all of these links and more that you can bring forward for your future exercises or conversations or activities for information in AI literacy.